All right. Back with another episode of Backyard Conversations, and I traveled to Phoenix, Arizona. Made the trip out here just to talk to my good buddy Nolan because he moved all the way from Wisconsin. So I have some special guests today. Actually, I came out to Phoenix to do a presentation on porcelain installation. We just finished that up this afternoon. Had 2 sessions. Thought it went pretty well. So we'll maybe talk about that a little bit and what we offered here in the Phoenix area. But I wanted to sit down with my buddy Nolan Sayles from Belgard and also Dan Harner from Belgard here in Phoenix. And just met Dan today. But we talked on the phone last week and we had a conversation. I was like, I need to get you and Nolan on the podcast because I think what I want to talk about is climate differences and, soil differences and that kind of the technical stuff, probably see what people care about. But Nolan, you just moved here from Wisconsin, so that's something we can talk about as well, and the kind of the transition from another market.
Completely different.
Yeah, I would say so.
Tell us about climate differences.
yeah, exactly. So, Nolan, why don't you share a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got started in the industry? That goes like what you're in diapers, right? And so let's go. I don't know if we need to go that far, but we can.
I mean, we can preface it maybe a little bit. Family's been in the hardscape business since the 70s, I want to say. They owned a manufacturing plant back in Milwaukee for many years. Fast forward 29 years, I get a phone call from Belgard. Hey, you're our new Belgard rep. I'm like, guys, I don't know anything about hardscapes. I was a truck driver at the time, picking up material out of their yard in Menominee Falls, and they're like, hey, yeah, we want you to be our new Belgard rep. And I'm like, guys, I like being a truck driver. Like, I make my schedule, we're good. And there was a lot of pressure to like, hey, come work for us. You're our new sales rep. So, yes, finally said yes. Was the Belgard rep in Wisconsin for 6 years, and just this past November. So I've been here 7-8 weeks now. Transitioned to being the Belgard rep here in North Phoenix, which is. You go from living in one environment your entire life, freeze, thaw, negative, frigid temperatures in the frozen tundra to, it's basically paradise here year round. So there's so much to learn here, but that's.
And we met when I was a Mirage rep because I was covering Wisconsin and I think we kind of hit it off, but we're kind of the same kind of people, good old boys. And I wasn't the typical tile salesman. So I didn't come in with the loafers on. I might have a couple of days, but if it required, if the look was necessary, but mostly it was a jeans and boots kind of thing, and we just hit it off. I'm excited for you in this move.
Thank you.
We'll get into that a little bit, and we have Dan. Tell us about your background and kind of how long you've been doing what you're doing now.
Well, I started in this construction industry out here in Arizona, 1997. So. 26 years now, which really doesn't seem that long, but looking back, it's several children ago. But yeah, I started off kind of hands-on, ended up going up to doing some landscape installs. Masonry was a big part of my background out here, building a lot of walls, and came on with Belgard probably 8 years ago now. And a couple of years ago, we kind of converted my role from being a territory rep to more of a contractor specialist, technical specialist for the team. Because of all those years of experience, it was a kind of an easy transition to have those hard conversations with a contractor about how to do an installation.
Right. So are you focusing on education and practices, best practices, that kind of thing, or?
We'll say that's what I'm trying to focus on. I mean, there's a lot of corrective actions probably that have to go into it because, unfortunately, we all know that usually the contractor doesn't call you until it's a little late in the job.
Sure.
It's all
never.
Now it's all installed. I'm trying to get paid. Why are they holding up my check? What's wrong with this? What can you do for me?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of those conversations that go on. But at the same time, being proactive on the other end of it, because you can take a lot of those learning experiences and then move it back over to how do we prevent that in the future? Let's have these conversations, educate the market. So.
Right.
Proper materials, proper practices. Don't put those pieces in.
And that's kind of an interesting role because that's not something that's that's going on everywhere in the country with as far as Belgard.
Interesting puts it mildly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was a unique one. Little terrifying because when they announced it was kind of right at the pandemic too. So, hey, by the way, we're not going to have you sell anymore, but we're going to have you go out and meet with people and do this. I'm like, wait, time out. Did I miss something? You know? So, but it was something that we've needed here for a long time because even just the residents that are transplants, you end up with a lot of some of those practices that come from people who are contractors who move here at the same time. So how do we reach and engage more and more of the market between the contractors, homeowners, have those proper conversations? It's definitely been an interesting experience.
Well, and that kind of leads us to where we are today is Megan Pratt, who's, I guess, your guys' superior. I don't know how that works, but so she, I saw her at H&A and we got to talking, and she asked if I'd come out and do a presentation. And so we talked today about porcelain installation. And so I was all gung-ho to do my open graded base presentation because I travel to the Northeast, even Colorado. That's a method we're
it's still
pushing.
relative.
Because of freeze thaw and stuff, and then the Northeast, Midwest. I even did a presentation on it in Texas last year because they're fighting some soil issues down there and different kinds of rain and things. So I was like, oh yeah, this is cake. I got this, no problem. And then I got to thinking, I'm like, wait, isn't that the desert down there? Like, do they even have gravel?
Or freeze?
Yeah, exactly.
Depends on what you consider gravel.
So this is an opportunity for me as a public speaker to step back a second. I don't know, public speaker, that's a reach. As a presenter and say, it's important to know your audience. So like if I would have shown up here and been like, oh, let's talk about these gravels you guys can't even get. So anyway, so I reached out to her and I said, hey, what's the primary installation method down there? And she said, road base and sand. So I was like, okay, so I'll just modify my presentation and we'll go over those things. So it got me to thinking about your transition, Nolan, from coming from Wisconsin and then coming here. And I talked to you on the phone and said, hey, why don't you get on the podcast and tell me about the differences? And then a week later, you're like, yeah, I don't know if I know the differences yet. And you've been here 6 weeks, so I totally get that. So we brought Dan in, so I think that was a great idea. Yeah.
There's so many different variables when it comes to, just the ground itself, the moistures, and that's exactly why Dan has the expertise and a better perspective than I do. But you can talk on it from one end and only pieces of it on the other.
Right. So you came from Wisconsin, where it's a little bit different than Kansas City, where it's a little bit colder. Mm-hmm. Probably you get more snow. I would say more frost. So thicker frost.
Yep.
So you're dealing with a lot of different issues, but it's something that I understand because we deal with it on a smaller level, or from me traveling and those things. So up there we were open graded base. Do the 3/4 inch, the 3/8, all that stuff. Under drains, get the water back, all that stuff out of there.
Keep it away from all of your sub base.
Yeah, exactly. So, because there's heavy rains. I mean, what's a normal snow in Wisconsin? Like, what would you say the inches?
It depends on where you are in Wisconsin. I mean, southern Wisconsin over the last decade has changed drastically. I can remember having snowbanks that were 5 feet when I was a kid.
Right.
Whereas if you look at it today, I talked to a contractor back in Wisconsin yesterday morning. It was 40 degrees and there was no snow on the ground.
Right.
So it depends on what part of the year.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different variables. So you could in southern Wisconsin, you could be anywhere between an inch to 12 inches at any given time. If you look at like Tracy's territory, when you get up into Green Bay, it's going to get a little bit heavier, and then even the further north that you go, the deeper it gets. So.
Sure.
If you were to break Wisconsin down into like a ladder, the higher you get, the population kind of thins out, but the snow also gets deeper. So, Green Bay is kind of like your last benchmark for a heavily populated area where you're going to be doing a lot of hardscape installs, and your snow is going to be anywhere between 12 to 36 inches at any given time.
Sure. And I was talking about that with somebody just in Kansas City. Like, I remember when I was a kid, we were getting 6 and 12-inch snows, and it's like we've had about an inch so far this year. So, it does. Things are different. And I've noticed it's colder and more snow later, and like it's more like towards February and that kind of thing. But so it just got me to thinking, like, we get on Instagram, Facebook, contractor pages, and LinkedIn and all the different places, and we're like, open graded base, open graded base, open graded base. And then and like, that's what everybody's, you got to do it. You got to do it. You got to do it. And then I'm like, wait a minute, there's other places in the United States that this isn't required. It's maybe not readily available. It's going to drive the price way up. It's completely unnecessary. So we talked earlier in the week, and we're just talking about some of this stuff. So hopefully we can recreate some of this conversation. I was like, man, I should have recorded that. But so tell us about, like, because I was thinking Phoenix, like sand. I'm thinking complete desert.
Yeah.
But you were explaining to me the other day, there's different types of soils. There's sometimes you get rains. It's like could be 4 inches of rain, and then it doesn't rain for months.
I think Nolan's seen more rain since he's been here than sunshine, so I think it followed him out here. But that's typical winter for us. That's when we collect it. But I mean, I think it's something like 9 inches is all we get all year long.
Oh wow.
So I mean, that's all the rain. Yeah. But the problem is, it's only in 6 rain showers.
Wow.
So I mean, it's like we got it out of the way now. We won't see it again for months. So that can create its challenges. But then it's the soils. I mean, where you're at living now, Nolan, I mean, you're right up against mountains, a lot of granite,
Sure.
different soils. And where I'm at, I'm surrounded by farm fields or open desert that literally probably nobody's walked through in thousands of years. So it's unpacked. It's just sitting there. So the soils can really deviate, and it's what's below when they start excavating and turning it up and they find it. There's a lot of clays in our soil. It hard packs. It gets solid, but when you think of those rain cycles of long periods of dry and high periods of
Sure.
rain, what happens with clay? It moves a lot.
Yeah.
But again, everybody comes out here and they think, well, it's the desert. You don't get any rain. Got nothing to worry about. I've dug down as far as I can. It's nice and hard. We're good to go. But realistically, the next 4-inch rain that we get, all of a sudden that whole installation is going to rise up some because the clay has expanded. And then 3 months later, it'll all dry out and it's going to sink some. So
you get the phone calls.
That's where my job comes in, to go out and say, well, you know what happened here. But yeah, it's really important to understand what's under the ground, what the ground is, and then how to put a proper base together to move that water. Because I mean, an open graded aggregate base over clay soils, where's the water going? Right into the clay. It's going to move even faster. So we got to work towards the drainage on that out here. So.
And we utilize open graded base for clays, but we have a lot more moisture. But at the same time, we're putting in the under drain, so it's evacuating that system out.
There's it's also a deeper base.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Just from what I've experienced,
Sure.
and I could be incorrect on this.
No.
Yeah.
In what I've seen from Wisconsin to here is and even Kansas City is the bases are much deeper, so you have that much more room to work with it.
Yeah. So we do like a 6-inch, usually minimal. But like ICPI this has 4 inches on well-drained soils. So would you consider these well-drained soils here? Or, I mean, you said there's clays in them, but
well, I mean,
because I'm thinking sand. I don't know why I keep thinking the desert here.
You think by some of the cars that are around that's all they think it is too. But no, I mean, it will go in. I mean, guys get away with 4 inches, and that's probably the proper phrase. They get away with it.
Right.
The 6 is probably the best. But again, that also, when you start digging, we got a lot of that caliche instead of just pure clay, so it becomes almost like a granite when you get down deep enough.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So you'll see crews just basically say, that's it. That's as deep as I can get. I don't want to dig any farther. That's going to require other equipment, jackhammers, whatever. I think we're good. It feels nice and solid. And when in reality, if you added enough water to it, you'd find out that it wasn't. It'll actually convert into another type of soil, basically, at that point. So, but they go, hey, 4 inches is good. We're good with that. And
well, as long as they compact, right? So we should be good on that.
Yeah, that's the theory.
Yeah. So you're explaining to me about a house or something where they had taken the landscape out or something.
Oh, yeah, that was a house I had actually lived in. No watering of any of the landscaping for probably 20, 25 years. It really dried out the soil. A lot of sand really became the sand you were
Yeah.
talking about. I found out how you do that here, by the way. Just don't water anything for 25 years.
Yeah.
But it was an older home, probably 40 years. It was really ironic because once landscaping was introduced and watering of the plants and other things started to happen, the house began to shift and heave. And there was actually a slab crack through the house that wasn't realized kind of thing, but you could actually feel the two sides of the house shift to a different level from each other and it would crack and pop like a brand new construction home.
Wow.
So you're like going, why is this house making those sounds? It's not new. It's 40 years old. It should all be settled. And then you start realizing, oh, yeah, we're adding water. The clays are starting to expand in a way they haven't expanded in a couple decades. And this whole house is literally shifting because of that. And that was a pretty good example to me of what you got to deal with.
And this might go down a rabbit hole, just so you're. So you probably just brought up another thing. Is like you probably don't have frost footings here. Are you just pouring them on slab and then building up from there? So like we have a 3 foot or 3.5 foot or 4 foot frost footing that goes around the whole foundation so that we don't have that. That movement.
Slab's basically as thick as the ABC we were just talking about. There's not a lot there.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
It might even be on ABC, and then that's a little bit of that. That's all you get.
And then you go up to the mountains, and then there's a whole different dynamic. And you guys are covering the whole state. Is that right? Or
So there's different reps for different parts of the state of Arizona, but one of the territory that I will be covering, as well as one of the other reps, is the mountainous area, which will have that freeze thaw.
Yeah.
And Dan and I were talking about this on the phone the other day. It's that freeze thaw isn't as harsh as it would be in Wisconsin or even Kansas City for that matter. But the fact that I think you made you gave me the statistic that there's more freeze thaw cycles there than anywhere else in the country.
So it's not actually the freeze; it's the cycles.
It's the cycles.
That's what really affects the soil, and I think that's maybe a misconception by some people. But like, it's actually the soil freezing and thawing and freezing and thawing. So the more times it's doing that, the more challenge it becomes. So that might be an area where you can introduce some, clean gravel bases.
That was actually one of the tasks I brought to us. If you want to introduce that style, I got the perfect spot for you. You're already a rep there.
Yeah.
You just saw it this week. Nolan went up there and he drives up in the snow and drives home. There's no snow.
Yeah.
It was that quick of a turnaround in how the weather is converting itself in that part of the state. It's at just the right elevation to where they'll wake up and it's in 20-degree weather in the morning, but by the afternoon you could be 60, 70 degrees on a good day. So it's really a weird cycle. So, and it's mountainous. They need to have drainage.
Yeah.
It's probably the great place to start.
Yeah. So what other differences, Nolan, are you seeing from Wisconsin, style, pavers, sizes, without maybe.
This is a rabbit hole for me because. And part of me has to step back because I do get so passionate about talking about hardscapes and hardscapes design and, Belgard Design Studio and all these things that I like to do and like to try. And the way that my contractors back home were really open to a lot of things. Obviously, I don't have that relationship with a lot of people here yet because I'm very fresh here. But, the inlays, the accent pavers, you don't see as much of it here. I hate to use the term cookie cutter because it's not fair to everybody.
Sure.
But it's what you see is here
production.
It's mass production. Throw it in the ground as fast as we can, and then let's get to the next one. So I find it very weird to see back in my home state where you have contractors that can only work 7 to 8 months out of the year that are taking the time to do the miter cuts and the bullnose and all these different pieces of craftsmanship that are really making that project pop and catalog worthy, if you will.
Sure.
Versus let's throw in a Cambridge cobble driveway and use the same color accent around the sides of it just because that's what we know. So
sure. Yeah.
And like I said,
and what you see is what you know.
Yes.
So that's another thing. Like my brother lives here, so I visited there last year, a couple of years ago. I think it was a couple of years ago. Went to visit, and I noticed, and they were in a rental house, and the driveway and the patio in the back were both Cambridge, like a cobble,
it's all the same.
and and every driveway is pavers. So in Kansas City, we're you're probably doing pavers here for the same price as we're doing poured concrete in Kansas City, so people look at it as a cost savings. So that's one thing. Maybe I take as an outsider, but I would say that what you see is what you know. Meaning, like, okay, our neighbor has a cobble driveway. Let's find that paver and match that. Let's not do anything crazy, you know. So it may not even be on the contractors themselves, as they're just doing what's out there and what's known, and so then it becomes their responsibility to say, okay, well, there's this new paver, and then it becomes your responsibility to portray that to the contractor, right? So, and then breaking them out of that, this is how we make money, and this is our production, and we know exactly what we're getting every time, and we don't have to blend colors and pick from different palettes, and so like, I don't know. What do you think of that?
I make some jokes sometimes that we got the same 7 crews doing all the installations. I mean, they look the same.
Yeah.
And when they're not working for whatever company, they're doing it on their own on the weekend. So I mean, but it really is. It's easier.
Yeah.
It's just the easy way out. Slow hanging fruit. If the driveway was done that way, all I got to do is offer you the exact same product to do everything else on the project.
Right.
And that's where we're trying to convert that thought process. Because if you're competing with the same guy doing the same stuff over and over again, where are your price points going?
Right.
I mean, are you really? Yeah. You ever going to make that retirement fund or anything, the fund that you're looking for, or you're chasing each other's bottom?
You're starving the market.
Yeah. So trying to get those accents, the differentiation, and that's probably not even the right word, but hey, textures, incorporating some of those things in design, becoming very design centric is one of the keys. And honestly, Phoenix had that at one point, and then everything happened. Everything kind of went away after 08.
Right.
And now it's been that slow ramp up again. And I think it really hit a volume level now to where now you can start separating guys, saying, hey, I want to teach you something new. So that way you can actually make a good living. You can actually incorporate design elements, do different things with the patterns, and play around with how you're going to do the edge restraints and the colors and the textures. And then nobody else is going to quote it the same way. And now you're separating yourself, and it's really a slow process, one at a time.
So, and we talked today about incorporating porcelain, as part of our education. So, like, one thing I say to contractors that are trying to try something new is just create a rug or a space. Like, it's a good place for porcelain. Even some of the other modular pavers, you could do that within something that's known or seen, something they're used to working with. And maybe they can see that, laying a larger format paver is actually more efficient than laying 3 small pavers. And I was talking to one of the contractors that was here today, and they were asking, we showed one of our projects that we did, and they're like, how are you getting to this level of project? And I used the line that you loved so much was, well, I actually didn't use it. I just said, what are you showing people? What type of projects are you showing? She's like, well, we show our projects that we do, And I said, well, then if you keep showing those projects, you're going to keep getting those projects. So, like, that's what I had said. We try to market for the jobs that we want to get. So if we're doing something small and we've kind of worked our way out of the projects that we don't want because we've marketed ourselves to the projects we want. So I said, if you keep showing the 10 by 10 patio that you did, then people are going to keep calling you, and people are going to refer you, and people are going to say, hey, they can do this for you. And I said, and it's a company that's established, been in business a long time, but if they want to recreate themselves, then they have to go out and prove that they can do it, right? So I explained that some of the things I did, I shared a quote the other day. It's overnight success is decades of working hard every day or something like that, So that's how I've, many years in the industry, and like 2 years ago when I got back into contracting, I was like, I have to go prove myself all over again. Because not only have I been a contractor, but now I've been a rep telling people I was a contractor. Now I have more people with eyes on me, and I'm gonna.
Everybody's waiting.
Yeah, and then I take a picture, and they're gonna. I just imagine when I'm doing my work that when I take a picture, somebody's gonna take their phone and like expand it with their fingers and like, oh, that's a cut. I don't like that cut.
We all do it.
Feel better now. I thought I was the only one doing that. Going, all right, they're doing this right.
So I'm like, I tell my guys, we're under a microscope because I'm not only installing, but I'm out teaching, and I'm like, so. I just try to raise the bar a little bit. I was telling them, one of the things you could do is, you're out there competing with everybody else that's doing very similar things to you're doing. So for you to have those pictures, you might have to go into a project and ask your client, can we have a little bit of design freedom, or can we do a couple things that we want to put our signature on, and it's going to be different than everybody else's. It's going to be so, and then you might not be able to charge for that the first couple of times, right? But it may not cost you much more either. It's just a matter of, let's do an inlay, let's do a double border, let's pick a different paver, let's do a different color scheme. And they were like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And I said, you might not make the profit that you would if you just went out and did everything else, but now you have something to show. Now you have something that differentiates you from everybody else in the market. That's just, let's throw and do production and let's get in and out. So that was just, and it's hard to compare markets because, we work 10 months out of the year is what we try to budget for. So if we're doing that, our price per square foot is going to be higher. I can't imagine working 12 months out of the year, 13 months out of the year, whatever they do here. And Nolan, you're having to deal with that. So you don't slow down, right?
We touched base on it earlier. Like I'm trying to figure out like what works because there is that drive and that passion, and it's full go. And if you're not careful, that can be a recipe for disaster fairly quickly. So it's trying to find the correct equation to being on the job sites and meeting with dealers and doing the design stuff, and how does it all mesh together to not burn yourself out?
I equate it to like living where it's 24-hour sunshine. You just got to remind yourself to actually go to bed. I mean, you can really get caught up quick around here because even when you're out all day with the sunshine, next thing you know is you're spending all night, and it's a balancing act for sure.
Yep.
If you don't mind, Craig, I'd like to go back to one of the comments that you were just talking about with that contractor that you were discussing with. And this is just personal perspective from what I see around the industry. And correct me if I'm wrong, but from what you've done and what your education and your knowledge on the industry, having that conversation when you started your business back up again was much easier because you knew how to have those conversations.
Right.
To go to the homeowner and say, hey, like, I need to expand my portfolio, and by doing that, I need to try different products, and you're okay having those conversations. I feel like there's too many contractors in the hardscape industry, and I'm going to use that as a whole. There's too many of them that aren't comfortable having that conversation.
Right.
And I feel like that's a piece of it in itself is what can these smaller contractors that are wanting to educate themselves doing is being comfortable in their own skin and confident enough to walk up to their homeowner and say, hey, let's try this.
Yeah. Well,
I just wanted to make that comment.
Also, there's another aspect of it too. Is like I'm a contractor. I'm not a designer. Okay, so I have to start getting my mind outside the box, right? Because I think I would like to get this done, but I want it to look good. So where you really see these really elaborate, like Dan Preston, or there's a guy Richard, RC Outdoor, and there's Premier Outdoor out in the Northeast, and they're like artists. Mm-hmm. These people are designers. Like that's how they started was, and I just named names. Now I'm going to get people mad at me because I didn't name their name, but what they're doing is creating art with pavers, and that's something that separates them. But then they also back it up with the craftsmanship, right? So then clients are actually calling them saying, I want what you offer, right? They're not out looking for work. They're people are calling them, and they're doing these really cool projects with really cool designs, and they're mixing and matching pavers, and they're putting natural stone in, and they're decks with it, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. But they're backing it up with the craftsmanship. Yep. So that's a thing where it comes into a design aspect too. So like, I don't know I don't know this market good enough to say that there's a bunch of designers here, or is there just a bunch of salespeople out selling pavers to put on a driveway? So maybe that's another aspect of getting some design freedom. But so what happens with my jobs is my designer designs it. I get in the middle of the job and I go, it'd be really cool here.
Change order.
Yeah. Well, yeah, sometimes. So that was where I didn't have a change order before because I was just like, I need to do this. So whether it was adding lights in the pavers or doing an inlay or turning a paver a certain direction. Like
a little bit more unique.
Yeah. And I would sometimes, I'd say to the client, hey, I just had an idea. I want to do this. They're like, sure, go ahead. And then it looks great when we're done. So that's a challenge for me because I kind of need to plan these things out a little bit better, But I have those pictures now to show.
Yeah, but when the opportunity presents itself, I feel like you or anybody would be a little bit more upset if you let that opportunity slip and you didn't say anything.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I don't want to. I hope this doesn't turn into like you said. We don't want to say that's all cookie cutter. Like I really believe it's what you see is what you know. So like
I got paver installation envy. We've got some guys that do a great job out here, but there is a lot of production installation. So design is one of the key pieces. And again, that it starts with how you're going to install it, but you got to have a good design.
Right.
And it's been too easy to just show up and do cookie cutter work for too long around here. It's one of the points of training, and to the point of helping the guys feel the confidence. I mean, that's why education is a big part of what we're going to do, especially this year around here. There's 5 million people or something like that in the Phoenix metro area. That's a lot of people wandering around and a lot of guys going out to have touches on these jobs. We're not going to reach all of them, but you start small and you start creating some of those pockets of the design forward thinking. And that starts to bring everybody else up with it. So.
And there are some amazing projects going on around here as well, too. So
gorgeous projects.
Yeah, so we can talk about that as well. And where are you seeing? Like, is it a certain area that's happening, or is it like?
It's kind of twofold, but I'll start with it starts on commercial projects here.
Okay.
So we get a lot of hotels and high rises. We get a lot of commercial areas that go in for shopping, retail, things like that. And you'll see people wander in those areas. Next thing you know, like, I want a little bit of that at home. That's one of the steps of how it's happening. But majority of it here is, Nolan's got to see some of the homes that we have in the area. There's a reason why the celebrities and athletes all live in certain zip codes and certain parts of town. And the views and vistas are just absolutely gorgeous. So you really see a uptick in those for because their outdoor living is a whole lot better than some of the other outdoor living.
Right.
But yeah, it's some pockets of the state you wouldn't think that you'd see it. I've got a contractor in Kingman that, most people think that's a truck stop on the way up to Vegas, but he's doing millions of dollars in installs. They're some of the biggest installations you'll see.
Wow.
They're really high-end installations. So we put them in our catalog almost annually. Wickenburg, who nobody's even heard of, again, in our catalog.
Cowboy town.
Yeah. It is. And there's actually billionaires living in that cowboy town. Sure. That's the part nobody realizes it's happening there. But we've got guys that are, in fact, I've got a contract there that was probably one of our leading porcelain installers. But he does very creative. And it starts, let's be honest, it's the pocketbook.
Yeah.
What the homeowner has for the pocketbook is going to set the tone for where you're going to go. But that same contractor in Wickenburg also started out by talking to the home builders in the area. It was a very smart move. It was savvy. He literally goes, "What is your selling point of the homes?" And they said, "Well, it's active outdoor living." He says, "Perfect." So he goes in and goes, "I'm going to give you a no-maintenance installation." So then he starts working the product from that. That's just one example, but out of 5 million people in the state, it's like, I can find you the good spots. We've got some good ones. I just got to drive the market up some more, because we got too many of the production guys going right now.
And what another thing because I've been terrible at this through my whole career is like spending my clients' money for them based on my bank account, And I think that's another thing that falls into all of this is like we go in, we know what the easy sale is. It's almost expected to have a paver driveway and a back patio that's paver, right? Yeah. But how can we like get a little bit more out of that? How can we offer like the design thing, or how do we elevate the project to a point where maybe they have a little bit more money they want to spend, but we're not really asking for it, And so that comes back to the pricing and the what the jobs are going for and driving the market value down. And so I think the attendance today was really really good.
Do you know what the number was?
I don't.
Do you want to guess?
No, not really.
You had 85 people show up.
85 people show up today. So that's pretty good, And what I like to see was there was some contractor, like a pretty good group from one couple different companies, so they're engaged. Like I feel like they're making an effort to learn new things and try new things. So, so that's good to see, because it was a work day. I mean, the sun was shining, 60 degrees. Like for me in January, they'd be like, I'm like, sorry, I had no Mirage. I'm going to go somewhere else and work, so. But yeah, it's so that was really cool to see. So I think there's and with the new pavers that Belgard's offering and trying to get those into this market, like the modularity and that's another thing. I'm sure I think you have an event coming up on that. Yes. Is that right? I was listening in on your conversation. But we talked, we had Joe Raboyne on, I talked to him, and we were talking about how, we like to do slabs, large pieces. So we do like the dimensions 18, and man, if you design that correctly, there's very little cutting, right. And then we're like, oh, let's do a 24 by 36, because that'll be cool. There's actually more cutting in that than there is the modular pieces, because you can mix and match the pieces to make your cuts for you.
Right.
So that's just another way to, show the value in, either large scale or different styles, or creating different spaces in that room. So anyway.
I'm super excited about the modularity to come here, because they haven't had it before.
Yeah.
And having it since 2019.
Can you move that in a little closer? Yeah.
Sorry. Bringing that into this market after relocating here is, I get to relive it all over again.
Right.
Which I had fun the first time with it. Why wouldn't I have fun with it the second time?
Well, I'll speak to the attendance a little bit. Not everybody gets to know a different market. I think Nolan heard about it. For the last couple of years, we haven't been sold out of pavers in Phoenix.
Wow.
We have been oversold on pavers.
Oh,
and we're not the only manufacturer in town.
Yeah.
So I often attribute 85 people on a work day at Sunny coming to a training. Okay, this didn't work for the last couple of years of not being able to get certain products. What do we do to invest in our company so we can start learning some other things?
Right.
What is available? What can I do to differentiate myself? Because when you think you're different than everybody else, but you're still out of pavers just like everybody else, you're not that different.
Yeah.
So you got to start addressing how you're going to do it. So that's generated excitement for modularity.
Yeah.
It's something different, something new. They're excited to learn about porcelain because it's a little more readily available because it's not coming off of our machines. And then there's challenges shipping in some of the stones that they're used to using around here. So,
freight costs and
availability, freight cost. It's caused all kinds of challenges. So when you have a market that's moving as hard and fast as we are, still growing at the rate we're growing exponentially, but yet you can't find any of the materials to accomplish the job. Yeah. I think that tends to create a little more open-mindedness to, okay, I'm ready to listen now. I heard you that. What do you have and what can I do? How can I grow? I'm willing to listen now. Let's sit down and have the conversation. So it went a long way towards that. So
good. That's good.
Yeah. Nothing like starving them for products to get them to want to buy others. So,
Hey, that's a great idea. That should be a marketing. We'll take that to the top.
Yeah, right. Careful. Some other companies might want to take that one. That could be dangerous for us all.
So that's another thing I talked with Joe about was like all the different companies. Like, so this is Super Light, right? So this is a company of Oldcastle, just like where I'm from. It was Northfield and Ashgrove, and there's all these other different companies that basically been acquired or whatever, then partnered up with Oldcastle, Belgard. So when you look at a catalog here, it's completely different than the catalog I have in Kansas City, and that offers its own challenges as a brand, right? So we try to train our clients, make sure you find we show them the catalog. We don't send them necessarily to the website every time, but because you can see things that maybe aren't available and that kind of thing. And that was what we were having a conversation with Joe is about how do we get like getting things to market quickly, because you're sending it to so many different companies with different types of plants and different kinds of, and molds and all this stuff. So you're trying to create your bread and butter, and you're like, oh, modularity, this is a whole new thing. So
we run into that with our catalog all the time because Belgard constantly reinvents and puts out new stuff. Yeah. But they may have it in Northfield before we have it here. So guess where our marketing assets come from? And so now I'm having to have the conversation at home where you see the pine trees and the rolling hills in the background. That's probably not going to.
I know where
that
that project came
Yeah,
from.
it's probably not from Phoenix. So I better tell you. So I mean, we're constantly trying to get our own photography done because our landscaping is completely different.
Sure.
Those scenes are going to be different, and you don't want to create that continued disappointment out here. There will be a cactus in place of the pine tree. That's going to be more of a rocky mountain sticking out over there. It's going to be.
Some people need to actually see it.
Yeah.
They're more visual than.
Society has become very visual now.
I think that's more of a generational thing, and that's a problem.
That's a whole nother rabbit hole.
That's a whole other rabbit hole, but they need to see it. They can't imagine it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and in fairness, I mean, there have been so many changes in the industry now that people like us that have been around the business, it's probably easier and quicker for us to be able to imagine it.
Yeah.
There's new blood coming in from the contractor side. There's homeowners that let's face it, they're getting younger and younger as they're buying their homes. So they don't have those exposures. They haven't seen them. They don't know what to expect. So they have to have the visual element to it. So it's trying to balance that. I mean, it's easy for all of us standing around and go, oh, I know it'd be great. This is fantastic. And do you trust me? Being the next sentence.
Which is where that design aspect comes in really handy in a lot of situations. It's depending on who the client is. If you can hit a home run with that design right away and there's zero questions asked, they'll sign the dotted line. Boom, done.
Well, and one of the things like what I was sharing earlier with the contractor I was talking to was, if you can take a little bit of time and do something to where you create a signature, then like people start reaching out. That's what I was explaining with those other clients. Like people are reaching out to them and them only. Mm-hmm. When and this has been really beneficial for me as I've progressed in the last few years. When people call me, they're not really calling anybody else. That's the fun part of it.
They're calling the brand.
So they're calling because they've seen what we can do. Yep. They're calling because we've been referred by somebody else, or they've been through a process of going through many other contractors that weren't really clicking with what they wanted, and then they get referred or see what we're doing, and then that's we can go in and we're either going to sell the job or we're not. I mean, so it's not like we're competing. So if you can find that different, like something that makes you different, where people are calling you and saying, I saw this at my friend's house. They said you did it. Instead of, I saw it at my friend's house, and they're like, yeah, everybody does that. So call 3 people and get 3 quotes, and
do you want to keep up with the Joneses, or do you want to be the Joneses?
So anyway, well, I appreciate, first of all, having me out and then having this conversation, and I hope it's helpful to some people. But I think it's important to kind of have the real conversation of like, there are different markets. There's not the same things. Like, we're not doing a lot of slabs yet. I mean, there may be some of it going on, but in Kansas City, it's like all slabs. Right.
Well,
maybe not all, but we're getting to that point where it's more and more. So
you constantly move the portfolio.
Right.
I mean, as the designs change, you've seen it. Driveways drive everything else to start with here.
Yeah.
So that's where we're excited with the modularity, because now maybe we can start generating those slabs to the backyard with the same appearance of what's in the driveway, and have those conversations more, because I personally like to see a little more slabs go in myself. It's it really does something for the design in a backyard if you can do that. So
and just even adding different textures or sizes and things like that. So, well, Dan, Nolan, thank you very much for your time. It's been great.
Thank you.
Great to meet you.
Yeah,
great to see you again.
Yes.
It's good to see you with a tan.
And we're only in January.
And it's January.
I think I just saw you in October. That was probably.
Yes, you didn't have the tan.
You didn't have a tan then. No. But it had been a hot minute since. No, I take that back, because I saw you.
Yeah, we've seen each other a few times, but
May?
Was
it May?
Something like that.
So yeah, it's
some barbecue, Kansas City.
Yes.
Yeah.
Delicious barbecue. It's always a pleasure to talk about the industry and see what you've done with your career, and I'm very appreciative, because I wouldn't be where I am without guys like you that have taught me things along the way. So thank you for allowing me to be on here, and thank you for coming to teach guys about porcelain today. I think that was the big win.
Yeah. All right.
That was a huge win.
Awesome. Well, let's go eat some dinner.
Sounds like a plan.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.